Hi, this is Steve Gillmor. This is the Gillmor Gang. We're going to do something. We're going to do what we've done every time since we discovered that RSS was dead several months ago, which is to just drill it in until there are no more survivors. So joining me in this effort, whether they like it or not, let's start with coming to us from the Internet Identity Workshop in Mountain View, Phil Windley and Chris Messina. Welcome, guys.
Hey, how's it going? I think we just lost Ethernet, so we're getting back connected here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can hear you, Chris. So that's why it's good to have the audio. Let's put coming to us from Utah, Craig Burton. Say something, Craig.
Hello, this is Craig from Utah.
Excellent. Coming to us from, I don't know, where are you, Kevin Marks? I'm
at Mission Bay in San Francisco. I'm here at the Ribbit Spawn event that's been going on this morning, and it's coming on this evening as well. If people want to come down and join a bunch of Ribbit geeks for drinks tonight.
What was the third word, the word after Ribbit?
Spawn. It's a frog thing. So it's our developer event. We've got a bunch of people hacking on the Ribbit API here, working out how to build phone apps on the web. And
last but not least, Robert Scoble, who's busy in his Mountain View Lodge retreat, disabling, friend feed.
Check out my new 27-inch iMac.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's 27-inch iMac. It's beautiful. Running the new Seismic desktop with list support.
And what is Seismic again?
It's this Twitter client. You might.
I thought it was.
Have you heard of Twitter?
I thought it was a video client. Just kidding.
Used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if only Seismic could do what TweetDeck does, we'd be cool.
What are you talking about, Craig?
What does TweetDeck do?
What does TweetDeck do? It does what Seismic does better. At least I don't use any of these things. I use FriendFeed, of course.
Of course.
You remember FriendFeed, Robert?
Right here.
Oh yeah. So I noticed that you restored yourself from your tragic mistake.
Which mistake was that? I made about 50 this week.
Just the recent ones. The one where you took your Twitter feed off of FriendFeed, yeah.
Well, I wanted to see if anybody was listening, and there were at least 3 people listening. So.
Excellent. I was hoping for the blocked Scoble feed to become, completely authoritative, but you nipped that in the bud.
Yeah.
All right. So, Phil Windley, what's the roundup of IIW? What's been accomplished there? And
roundup at IIW. I think I saw a couple of trends. One. User-managed access, they pronounce it Yuma, something like that. Anyway, it's about a protocol for allowing users to manage access to their data. That seemed to be getting some traction. A lot of talk about activity streams and the ideas behind creating activity streams from the various social network services. And then there's a lot of talk about cooperation, or not necessarily talk, but work on cooperation between OpenID and information cards, driven, I think, by the government's recent, essentially subtle mandate that they become the same thing and stop bothering people with the marketing problem of having 2 different identity services. And so my joke is that OpenID keeps incrementally adding features in such a way that it asymptotically approaches information cards.
Okay. I think we're going to get some commentary on that, but Chris Messina, can you unpack, even the remotest element of that?
Can you repeat that again?
Can you explain what Phil just said, please?
Yeah, certainly. I will do my best. So I think at basis there is actually a lot of collaboration that's happening here, which is really promising. I think that we are putting a lot of our sort of, so-called differences behind us, and recognizing that, first of all, the marketplace wants an identity solution, and they can kind of, care less about the insider baseball that goes into it. That said, there is quite a bit of both good technology and good solutions that have come out of both sort of like the OpenID and InfoCard camps, and I think the government has sort of forced us to work more closely together and to acknowledge a bunch of the good stuff that we've come up with. So in that respect, I think, Phil's totally right that the government has created this sort of forcing function to get us to move forward. It's also unearthed a lot of, scary, worms that need to be dealt with, I think, in both technologies and both of their adoption paths in the marketplace. But this event has sort of, I guess, I don't know if I'd say, reaffirmed or provided some validation that we are collectively moving forward at a very rapid pace. And the fact that we can call this set of technologies OpenID means that we kind of have a brand or a colloquial expression that the media can start talking about to raise awareness of this idea. So I think that itself is a good thing, and maybe helps to clarify what's going on. With regards to the activity stream stuff, we can certainly get into that a little bit more, but that too, I think, is becoming just sort of part of the dialogue, the conversation that people take for granted. And it's like, oh yeah, the activity stream stuff, the newsfeed stuff, that makes sense. And now we have a format for expressing it in a way that's cross-site, and it enables a bunch of other things to take place.
Okay, Craig, can you kind of give us, from Utah, since you didn't come to this IIW, can you give us your kind of overview of what you think's going on here at something approaching English?
Sure. In my mind, the issue isn't OpenID approaching information card architecture at all, but rather that both the information card mechanism and OpenID are selector-based. Much more important, I think, is the identity model presented by the past, which was the cookie model, and the future, which is a selector-based model, and that both information cards and OpenID are, in this collaboration that these two guys are talking about, are selector-based. It's the selector, not the card architecture. It's protocol independent. It's card, identity framework independent. But the fact that it's a selector on the client that's much more secure than a cookie model that can be spoofed is what I think the real value is.
So, this is a reach, but of course that's why I'm doing it here. If RSS has been, as Robert Scoble suggests, been transplanted or been replaced by lists, in terms of the new Twitter lists, is the cookie being replaced by the selector? And what the hell is a selector, and why do we care?
Yeah, certainly. It would be really controversial to say that the cookie is dead, but in the same way that RSS will go on forever, so will cookies. The selector model for identity, which was first instantiated by Microsoft doing card space in Windows and then publishing it so that everybody could follow the architecture, which of course the Higgins open source Higgins project did with Novell, IBM, Azigo, a bunch of other players I'm sure I'm forgetting who are very important, but they went ahead and then built selectors for every other operating system, for Linux, for Macintosh, for Windows, and so on, and not just the Microsoft instantiation of the selector. With the selector in place, then, multiple identity models like the information card model and the OpenID implementation can live in the selector. Now, living in the selector means that there's kind of a sandbox around it, which makes it much more difficult to spoof, to get in between the user and what's happening in your browser or an application and redirect your Internet I/O without your permission. So
all right,
the selector is just a more secure architecture for identity.
And the reason the government, Phil and Chris, the reason the government's getting into this is because we're moving toward something that could be legitimately used as a transaction-based environment. Is that why we're seeing this this effort?
We just got a bunch of noise, Steve. I'm not sure whose audio channel just opened up.
It's me. Since he was asking me a question, I figured I'd open up my mic. But
Yeah, everything's working, Robert.
unfortunately, it's noisy, Robert. Sorry.
I mean, is that why we're this is moving beyond you know, the kind of grassroots support that OpenID started with? Is it, and why is the government getting involved?
The government is looking for ways for citizens to identify themselves when they come in for government web services, and they've identified certain levels of assurance. Level of assurance 1 through, is it 4, Chris? You know, based on the type of transaction it is, and OpenID is, as I understand it, capable of handling level of assurance 1. But the government doesn't want to say, well, you got to use this system for this and this system for that. They want to say, use this system and it'll handle the right level of assurance. And so underneath, there might be different technologies that are handling different different transactions, but citizens will just think of it as a single identity system. At least that's my understanding of the goals and purposes behind what's happening.
You agree, Chris?
I think the other aspect of that is just to make use of accounts and identities that people are already using and familiar with. I mean, a lot of this stuff, the conversations that we have here at this event, I think are so beyond most people's comprehension of these things. I mean, just watching the conversation happening about Twitter and OAuth today illustrates that a lot of people just don't have a real solid mental model of how identity systems work, how authentication and authorization differ, and so on. So I think the government is largely trying to, first of all, avoid the need to issue citizen identities, because most U.S. citizens, I shouldn't say most, some U.S. citizens vehemently don't trust the government with their identities. So they want to use an identity that they trust, that is with a provider that they choose. And that's one of the large motivators here. I also think that the government is in some ways being very smart and crafty and saying, well, we really shouldn't try to invent our own identity system and identity technology, because, well, we've tried that before, and we spend millions and millions of dollars on these consultants that come in and tell us how to, you know, build another beautiful fucking snowflake, and no one ever adopts it. So in contrast to that, it's like, well, let's use something that the commercial marketplace has more or less, you know, said is good enough, takes us to the point where we can start customizing some of the user experience for government websites, and let's, you know, outsource that problem to somebody else. And by that problem, I mean the issuing of identities.
Kevin Marks, you want to jump in on this a little bit?
I mean, my take at IW this year was we're seeing lots of these different technologies starting to come together, as Phil said. Not just the OpenID and identity cards, but OpenID and OAuth hybrid stuff, that's very mature now. And the other bits and pieces around Webfinger and XRD discovery and all those pieces that are saying, starting from email address, how do I get to these other identity endpoints? That was all starting to make sense as well. So
okay, Webfinger, please.
Okay, Webfinger is the idea is OpenIDs are naturally URLs, but people aren't used to using URLs to identify themselves. They're used to using email addresses. So Webfinger is a way to start from an email address and get to an OpenID endpoint. It was proposed, I think, last year at IW, and Blaine Cook gave a nice demonstration of it working this year. It's webfinger.org. So basically, instead of logging in with a username and password, you just put a username in, which is an email address. From that, it finds the right place for you to an OpenID login and logs you in through that.
How does it know which OpenID provider you use to get an OpenID?
Because it's basing it off the email address, so it's using the domain and the email address, and then there's a protocol for getting from that domain.
So if I have an OpenID from Yahoo and from Google and from some other IDP, how does it know which one to use?
Because you put Kevin Marks at gmail.com or Kevin Marks at yahoo.com, and it works out from that. Well,
no, I mean, I may use Gmail and have OpenIDs from multiple.
Yeah, well, you can if you know enough about OpenID to put in an OpenID URL, that works. If you don't, you just put an email address in. This gets you that extra stage and gets you to an endpoint that works for you. So if you put in a Yahoo address or a Gmail address now, it will log you in with OpenID rather than asking you for a password.
Well, see, my whole point, and Chris, maybe you want to jump in on this, is the NASCAR problem where when you have multiple OpenIDs, how do I know which one to choose when? And just, I mean, if I have multiple email addresses, I have the same problem. I don't know how to use what.
I think one of the things that you're alluding to is this problem of basically identity proliferation. Every account wants to, or I'm sorry, every website, web service wants to assign you with a new account. And sometimes, you get the right username, sometimes you don't. But what this has led to is, of course, people have many, many accounts over many services.
Right.
So one of the things that, of course, we realize is that, well, OpenID is one way to unify those things. But as Kevin said, URLs really just aren't things that people right now associate with people, frankly. So consequently, since most websites currently ask you for an email address, the hope with this idea is to take an email address, which let's say you type it into the web browser, it's not going to pull up a website, for your account. The idea is, can we sort of overload that form of an identifier, namely one that looks like an email address, to then get to an OpenID URL? So your question is a little bit spurious, I guess, just because in this particular case, if you're using a Gmail email address, you're probably going to want to or be able to use your Google OpenID anyways. So
I think that's a huge assumption, Chris. I have OpenID email addresses at all those places.
Yeah. So hold on. Let me first answer one part.
Right,
of it.
but
So
if you want to use
the problem is.
You're not who this is aimed at.
Right.
You understand OpenID. You have a bunch of logins. You can use those already. And this is aimed at someone who goes to the site and wants to log in and doesn't understand that protocol layer. Blaine always says, this is for my grandmother. She wants to be able to log in and find the stuff I shared for her, but she doesn't understand how the OpenID stuff works.
Well, and more importantly, it's also a way of avoiding the need to create yet another password that you associate with an email address in some other website. So, to your point, Craig, if there's nothing about the Webfinger protocol that precludes you from entering a Gmail email address and having it resolved to a Yahoo or a Microsoft or My OpenID or your own self-hosted OpenID. Nothing in the protocol prevents that. It's a matter of whether or not that webmail provider that supports Webfinger allows you to customize that and allows you to point to any arbitrary OpenID provider that you choose.
One of the things that I noticed at the people's name tags were not supporting business names or anything. They were supporting the Twitter ID.
Yeah.
That's true.
So how's that going to affect? It seems like Twitter continues to be underestimated in some ways and overestimated in others. And whether
Steve?
Just to finish the thought, Robert, and then please jump in. That its ability to sort of Borg-like absorb things that may be a little bit opaque to the average user, and force sort of a stampede in their direction, which then has to be sort of factored in. I'd like to hear what Chris has to say about this at some point. Aren't we going to see Webfinger for Twitter identities starting to become an important dynamic? And go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, yesterday a guy at the PayPal show showed me this new thing that he's coming out with called iSense.net, and it's a micro payment system for content. So you could come over to my video, and if you like it, and you wanted to see an additional video that I'm charging for, you could just click a button and say, "Pay me 30 cents" or something like that, and it would give you the option to pay with Twitter. And I was like, how do you pay with Twitter? And he goes, well, think about it. You put your phone number into Twitter, and then all of a sudden I can charge your phone for micro content. And so people and developers are starting to add stuff onto Twitter that makes Twitter an identity system of its own. And I'd love to hear what our experts think about that, and then come back and let's talk about PayPal, because PayPal's a big gorilla in this room that hasn't been mentioned yet, and they're announcing a lot of identity initiatives.
Well, I think there are a couple interesting things here to consider. First, PayPal is on the board of at least the OpenID Foundation and perhaps the InfoCard Foundation. I'm not sure, but clearly they're looking at this. The second piece to this, and this is one of the reasons why Webfinger is interesting, is because, of course, PayPal is keyed off of an email address that they specifically don't host. So all the PayPal accounts, of course, are based on email addresses. Well, it's a logical sort of extension to think that within your Webfinger profile, you might point to a payment service or a payment system. And, of course, PayPal is nicely lined up there. And Amazon is sort of getting into this space, but in a very sort of awkward way. So I won't even get into that. But there was another question about Twitter, and Twitter as an identity provider. And I think with Twitter Connect, we're starting to see, sort of like the basic aspects of that starting to leak out a little bit, where people are starting to use Twitter as a way of creating new accounts. But I don't think that it's being used in the same way that, for example, Facebook Connect is being used. And I think this is actually an opportunity that Twitter could seize if they did a couple things. I mean, as you mentioned, yes, the Twitter account could, of course, be turned into a Webfinger account so that you could, let's say, look up Chris Messina at twitter.com. Now, you wouldn't be able to send email to that identifier, but that identifier, if you actually resolved it, would provide you with a way of getting to my account and finding out who I am. The logical thing for Twitter to do here would actually be to support OpenID, since they already support OAuth. And importantly, what we saw Google do this week with opening up what's been worked on and called the hybrid, which is a combination of OpenID for identity and OAuth for authorization, is for Twitter to do the same thing. They're already 50% of the way there. They already support OAuth. So it's not very far off to say, well, when you see a Twitter Connect button on some web page, do the authentication with OpenID, and then the next step would be to get the OAuth token that allows you to tweet. So combining those two things together, I think, would actually be a very smart way for Twitter to move forward without inventing a lot of new technology and allowing people to use their Twitter accounts wherever OpenID is already supported.
Interesting.
So that's, I guess, what I would like to see.
Yeah, you're nodding, Kevin. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the OpenID OAuth hybrid is very significant because OpenID itself is only really saving you entering the password, whereas once you tie it to these other endpoints like the contacts and the activity stream stuff, the value you get from using that as the login is very powerful. Now, I think FriendFeed led the way with this by showing what you can do with the one-click login with both Twitter and Facebook and Google, where you log in and it creates you an account and brings all your friends in and shows you all your friends' feeds straight away in one go. Not all. That all
sort
the
of
ones who are members
ran adrift as soon as Facebook got wind of it.
It still works. I think. Yeah. I mean, we encourage Facebook to keep that idea there. Because we were chatting to them about it last week. But the point is, as a straight replacement for email and password, OpenID is not that strong an incentive because all it's saving you is typing in a password in one place and you're typing it in somewhere else. Whereas if by signing in with that, it can bring a whole bunch of your environment with you, it can bring your profile, your set of friends, and the ability to post back. That's what I was getting lots of from IW this week. All those pieces are starting to fit together, both with the activity stream stuff, the salmon stuff, Webfinger, all these bits and pieces. Everyone's trying to solve the same problems.
Yeah, I'd like to get to the activity stream and salmon stuff in a minute, but I want to stay on. Somebody mentioned PayPal. And we had an interesting conversation last night about what PayPal is doing in terms of rolling up small micropayments and being able to cache them until they can push them back across the wire, which enables them to effectively allow much smaller transactions to take place without the overhead of either their cost or passing that on to the consumer or just not allowing it. So there's going to be a whole lot more ubiquity of small, fine-grained, real-time transactions that seem to be appearing. Does anybody want to comment on that? Craig?
What did you say?
I said it's all going to be good just as soon as RSS is dead.
As soon as RSS is dead. Well, like I say, these things die hard, and we can say that to get attention, but it's going to be a long time before they go down.
Well, I know you said that, but the dead metaphor is about momentum, and the momentum is clearly in
shifted
in the hands of Twitter, and capital or small t asterisk I whatever.
Well, I'm just sitting here reading the different websites that have like twitter.com/webfinger. That you can follow, and then it jumps over to using Twitter and OAuth to log in instead of your name and password or your email address. So all the things we're talking about look like they're moving very fast. I mean, I didn't even know that. So here we are talking about it, and it's happening underneath our feet.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good handoff to this issue of salmon and the activity stream folks. If Chris, could you give us sort of a short summary of what went on at IIW about this, and then I'd like to sort of steer the conversation toward what I see as the appearance of what Craig's talking about here, a number of essentially hub servers that supply different kinds of content, which are then being mashed up into, what used to be called a web page that now Robert Scoble cannot control.
That's right. So no, he's not going to blog anymore.
I have control of the columns over here on Seismic. That's about it.
So, Chris, you want to? What the hell is salmon, for God's sake?
Yeah. Well, do you feel confident there's enough awareness about activity streams in that project?
Well, I mean, since Kevin's been, salting the conversation for a month or two about it, why don't you just, take off from that? I mean, there have been sessions which ostensibly were at IIW, which were ostensibly about activity streams, which had a salmon content. So can you?
Yeah.
And Chris, I've never. I think it's good to go back and because there's people here. I don't know what activity streams is anymore.
I know, but they can go back and listen to all the old shows.
We weren't listening when we were listening to it.
Version, right?
Well, they can go back to not listening to the old versions.
The 1 minute version is the generalized. Activity streams are the generalized way of doing these kinds of Twitter, Facebook, friend feed, MySpace status updates. So they're extensions to the feed protocols to mark up the extra stuff, the actions that you can take in the social networks and move them around. That's basically what activity streams are.
Okay.
Yeah. So and to build on that, one of the important things that we did with the design of activity streams, I mean, we were largely trying to decentralize friend feed. So I'll put it like that. And the realization was that Atom and RSS were largely built for a time period where everybody was blogging. So that was the primary activity that was going on that was encapsulated in those formats. Well, as it turns out, as more and more people started using the web and it became a publishing platform for a lot more than just documents and blog posts, people started to syndicate other types of activities. And sure, you can sort of put a video or a photo into a regular blog post, but more complicated activities like adding friends or adding things to a wish list or adding photos to sets and groups and things like that just don't really lend themselves well to the current RSS Atom infrastructure. So what we've done is we sort of extended Atom in the direction that we specify who did something, what they did, and what was the object of that activity. So essentially actor-verb objects. All right. So we take an Atom feed, you kind of upgrade it to be activity streams compliant, and voila, you have a way of aggregating activities from all sorts of different sources without any regard for what service is actually in play. So you can substitute out your services all you want. Okay, let's move on from that. So Salmon, of course, is kind of it learns from and sort of builds upon some of the pub sub hubbub idea of doing the real-time web stuff. And the idea of Salmon is that you're publishing out a stream of comments for which there are potentially many listeners, and they want to receive those comments in real time. And not only do you want to receive them in real time, but of course you also want to comment and reply back to those comments in real time. So you can have a friend feed-like conversation, but across many different domains and many different vertical places. So
yeah, but how do you do that? How do you do that when many different times and places are completely unaware of each other?
Right. So let's ignore the aspect where there might be context where you want to push out some content and you want to have comment streams that are completely unsynchronized. That case is well handled today. So in the future, you might want to actually have a comment stream going, let's say, on building43.com, as well as in friend feed, as well as in Facebook. And those comments need to be happening all at once because it's a live event, and it's just a bunch of different venues that people chose to go to. So Salmon solves that problem essentially by using a similar method of pub sub hubbub and pushing these comments back up to the original source where the original comment came from. So when it comes to activity streams, and actually before I get into that, I should say that a Salmon post, a Salmon comment, is actually just an Atom entry. So again, we're just using Atom, but we're making it real time. And we're adding the Atom threading extension so that you know what the comment is in reply to. So you're essentially taking an original comment, writing something, and then setting it back to the original source. And then you're having a conversation that way. So you imagine you can start doing this with activity streams, because activity streams are built on top of Atom. Now where this becomes really interesting, and one potential place where this becomes interesting is perhaps in games, where someone just got a high score or they invited you into a challenge, and now you can actually see what the actual activity was, so you can filter out the irrelevant activities, and you can bring people into a new context or system just based on the activities that are flowing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, Kevin, can you unpack that, please?
Well, the
it is ironic, by the way, that Kevin is explaining things. Usually it's you have to slow the tape down to understand what Kevin says.
Well, I've already been explaining things to you before, so you're used to the vocabulary I use, I suppose.
To your grandmother.
Or Blaine's grandmother. So the thing to think about with activity streams is that they're the set of stuff that come out of one site that you've done. Also, or you can draw the set of activities your friends have done. Each activity is sort of atomic, but they come in a stream that belongs to a certain person. The idea of salmon is that when you reply to one of those, if the activity is then fed itself through lots of different sites because you happen to be reading it in a different place, you don't want the comments to get fragmented and lost all over the place. So this can let the comments on those feed back up to the source of the event and then flow back downstream again. That's the idea behind it. So it's Ken was asking in the comments is why is this the special kind of activity stream? And it isn't. The salmon part is about how you move this particular kind of stuff back upstream. So it's an activity stream element that's in reply to another one and can have any of the activity stream stuff in it. So it could be, say it was something like Photo Booth or Daily Booth, where you take a photograph and in response to that I post another photograph where I'm pulling a face or something. That could fit inside the salmon wrapper, go back upstream to Daily Booth, or be shared out with the other sites that take that as well. So yes,
does that explain why you're using the name salmon, because it goes back upstream to spawn? And
yes, exactly. Yeah. That's the metaphor or the pun or whatever the hell John was thinking of.
So now, just gratuitously, since the word spawn was just used, what the hell is Ribbit spawn?
So Ribbit spawn is our Ribbit Developer Day. We launched Ribbit Mobile on Tuesday. Ribbit Mobile is it's like basically a personal telephone center. So what you do is you route your cell phone into Ribbit. It can then route it to other phone numbers for you, take voice call, transcribe it, send it back to you. And Ribbit Spawn is the developer day for developing apps on top of Ribbit.
How does it compare to Google Voice? Because that's what I've seen people compare it to.
So the difference is that Ribbit is primarily an API for telephony, for doing anything you want to do with telephones. Ribbit Mobile is a product built on that. Whereas Google Voice is primarily a product, it doesn't have an API underneath it. And the other thing that the point of this developer day is to show people how they can build their own telephony apps on top of this. So if you wanted to write a web app that incorporated phone stuff, you can use Ribbit to provide all the phone stuff for you, so you don't have to worry about dealing with phone companies, because that stuff's complicated. Right. And we've got a bunch of different models for that. You can either build it as an app for Ribbit Mobile. So if you're a Ribbit Mobile user, you just log in using OAuth, and all the phone stuff happens in Ribbit Mobile. Or if you want to build a standalone app, you can become a Ribbit developer and provision your own accounts and do stuff that way. So there's this sort of very broad, very general telephony API underneath all this, and then Ribbit Mobile is a particular product built on top of that that's designed to be the sort of consumer-facing part of it, if you like.
Steve, I'm fascinated about the activity streams and the salmon and all that from the aspect of curation, because on this screen back here I have all these tweets and Facebook items and friend feed items coming at me, and I can't join them together. So it sounds like all these new systems that Chris Messina is talking about will let us translate from Twitter and YouTube and Flickr into an open format called activity streams or something like that. And can we do stuff there and curate it and then spit it back out using salmon? Is that what I'm understanding?
You're asking me? No.
I'm asking Messina.
Yeah, that's what I thought. He's right there.
Sorry.
I wasn't listening.
That is one of the hopes. So one of the ideas with activity streams, of course, is to enable all these different places to start emitting activities, regardless of where they're coming from. And that could be, Ribbit or Google Voice or Google Wave or who knows whatever comes next. And one of the ideas is that you can channel activities to the proper context, the proper inbox, the proper place where it's going to be most relevant and valuable to you, in a way that currently is just really, really hard to do, and that machine learning just hasn't really shown promise in being able to do effectively. So
actually,
I guess to answer your question, that is one of the hopes in this regard.
Go ahead, Greg.
Go ahead.
Hey, Phil, wouldn't I be able to do all this with the Kinetics app right now without having to adopt a new protocol? Or I could create the context with the Kinetics application right now and across all these platforms, right?
Actually, I want to consume these things inside Kinetics and write rules against them. I mean, I see things like activity streams as being great things to write rules against. Being able to say things like, if I've been to the Computer History Museum more than twice in the last 2 days, then do something when I log on to Twitter or whatever.
It's just another information point for
yeah, it's a great information point. I'm pretty excited about it.
And similarly, Ribbit, since it has a well-developed API, is yet another information point.
Yeah.
Just to point out about this in terms of whether it's machine learning or what have you, I think that Phil's exactly right. That one of the benefits is that with activity streams, you don't need to be aware of potential emitters of certain activity types or verbs or object types. That you can write the rule once for a certain type of activity, and then any number of activity providers can sort of either compete or allow all this stuff to flow into one consistent inbox. So if you have friends that are publishing photos across many different services, but the verb is post and the object type is photo, then a smart aggregator or something that develops sort of context for you could actually create kind of a gallery on the fly from all your friends without having to know about any of the services that they happen to use.
And if I understand it, sorry Kevin, but if I understand it correctly, it also is adding structure to the activities themselves, right? So if I get a Twitter feed, it doesn't necessarily have structure in it, whereas this is going to say who, what, where, and I'd be able to pick that out in a structured way.
Here's a use case that I'm already hitting with Twitter lists. I have a Twitter list for tech news brands, and then I have a Twitter list for tech news people, the people who write all the news on the tech news brands. Twitter doesn't let me mix these lists together. Steve Gillmor calls it stream splicing. Is this new open system going to let us take these two lists, build activity streams out of them, and then join them together? Is that sort of one of the use cases that you're looking at?
Yeah, you'll need a 54-inch iMac after you get done with all of that, Robert.
That's because you have to have TweetDeck and Seismic running at the same time.
Well, if we can't even join list streams for inside Twitter, imagine how bad it is if I'm trying to, watch Chris Perillo's video show and stream it into my, have it all joined together into one long stream. I'd love to see that.
Well, this is one of the reasons that people don't understand why Track was so fundamental to this whole architecture. Track isn't about finding stuff. It's about ruling out other stuff. It's about thinning down the stream. It's about filtering not negatively, but rather, constructively.
Selectively.
Yeah.
User defined.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the point of the activity stream stuff is to give more structure into these streams so that you can build tools like Kinetics, so you can build tools that do stream splicing, you can do tools that joins things together, and we can have these smarter tools without everyone having to write a clever parser for each site for the data they have, but we can put it in common format. And that's, the attractive thing is how much cooperation we are getting around this. That was, the thing that I came back from IW this time was that we are getting everyone who cares about this stuff sitting down in the room, which is great.
Yeah. Chris,
well,
how much of the web?
Yeah.
How much of the web is available on activity streams? I mean, is there a Twitter translator to translate tweets into the open activity streams? Is there one for friend feed? Is there one for Facebook? Is there one for YouTube? Is there one for Flickr?
So it's I would say no, it doesn't quite work that way just yet. Part of it is convincing these stream providers to actually come on board, and we've actually been making a great deal of progress. So I will say that Facebook is emitting activities using the activity stream format. MySpace is doing the same. Opera is actually using it in their Opera Unite platform. In fact, TweetDeck is using activity streams as the way of pulling in activities into its platform. So this is a publisher-subscriber type situation where we need adoption from the publishers first.
Let's
then hopefully motivate the aggregators. So
let's drill down a little bit more pragmatically about. You mentioned that Facebook is being used in that way. It's emitting activity streams. Does this help solve or their what I consider to be their fundamental problem of the comments absolutely having nothing? They go into this black hole. Where you see them in email passing by occasionally, but
right.
It
could. There's a bigger problem with policy with Facebook. So the technology only gets you a part of the way there. The rest is convincing Facebook actually to open up that data and to allow it to flow outwards. So they could represent comments very easily in activity streams and in the activity streams format. Whether or not Facebook actually allows that data to go free is an entirely different decision.
All right. Well, that was really a trick question because it also illustrates you've got two different hub servers here. One that you're building around activities and another that you're building around comments with Salmon. How do you normalize all this stuff?
Well, so one of the good things that we're trying to really push for is the use of specific IDs, unique IDs within all these different entries and activities that are flying around. So the notion is that you start actually both responding to your, with your comments to a specific ID for an activity, and that means that wherever that activity goes across any of these hub servers, you have one canonical ID for these things. So hopefully it should actually reduce echoes in these streams and allow the data to flow more freely across many different domains without the kind of noise that you sometimes see today on FriendFeed and places like that.
And how do you integrate activity cards, Craig, Phil?
Activity card? Oh, you mean kinetics rules?
Action cards.
Action cards. Sorry.
Action cards. No. Anyway.
Yeah. The idea I have as I think about it is I'd love to be able to write rules against it and use those rules to either insert new activities into the stream. I mean, this is kind of Robert's curation idea. Being able to do that sort of thing. You could do that semi-automatically even, or even just consume it in order to modify someone's experience online or, on a phone call or wherever you're affecting that experience. So I think it's a great source of data, and the idea that someone's creating a single format to pull it all in together makes me kind of excited.
All right, I guess we're everything's going to be okay. In other words,
it's all roses.
I'm going to be at Seismic today. Is there anything I should be asking them about this stuff? Because they're one of the clients that competes with TweetDeck and with Tweety and other clients. What do you want them to support?
Activity streams. Tell them to read activity streams. Tell them to read the activity streams that MySpace and Netflix are publishing now and add them to MySeismic. That'd be great.
Who cares about MySpace?
Furthermore, I think there's a great opportunity to...
Lots of people care about MySpace. They just don't have to be our friends. That's how it works. MySpace uses than Twitter still.
Many of the MySpace people are our friends, but who cares about MySpace?
MySpace is great for music. I'd love to have some nice music on a separate,
MySpace is about to go
column.
poof about music. Oh, come on. Britney Spears released a song on Twitter, and it sold like 1 million copies in like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, MySpace is going to get blown away in that space. Who
that,
cares about MySpace? Raise your hand.
I care about MySpace.
Spotify's coming on. Okay. Google is adding music to searches, which is... I talked to the founder of Pandora, and he said that's going to shake up the industry. Pandora's out there; they're getting tens of thousands of downloads just on the iPhone every day. It's an interesting world to watch. But MySpace is still where my son goes to look at music and listen to music.
Yeah,
I think one of the overlooked values of a format like activity streams, and this was true of RSS too, is that it allows you to interact with someone on a platform that is not something you follow all the time. If I had 100 friends on MySpace, I'd be on MySpace, I'd be looking at them, etc. But I really only know one person on MySpace that I would like to follow, and that's Monica Keller, because she's active in the identity space. I'm not going to join MySpace just to go find her, but with something like activity streams, I can see all of those things start to come together, and I don't have to be on each platform, and it doesn't matter if they're doing something once a week or whatever. They all come together, and I see it when it happens.
Right. The reason that I'm pushing back on MySpace is because politically, the only thing I'm particularly interested in right now is forcing or pushing, encouraging, that would be the nice way of putting it, Facebook to adopt some of the technologies that they acquired with FriendFeed. And, about 20 minutes ago, Chris Messina said something about how this whole thing started as an attempt to create a distributed friend feed. And I've seen him quoted to that effect, but can you unpack that? I mean, first of all, why does the distributed part of this have to occur? I mean, if Scoble's right, friend feed's dead, and we don't need to distribute that. We should just move on.
Well, let me say something about that.
Sorry, I'm just. You don't do the muting, I will.
So,
go ahead.
So, when I say so first, I guess there's two parts of this. One is I talk about it as it's the friend feed problem, because I looked at friend feed in the beginning, and what they were doing was going around allowing you to pull in all these RSS feeds, and then they were writing custom code for every new service that they added. They added a total of 58 different services that you could add to your friend feed profile, and then they sort of pull those things in together as one big stream, and that's perfectly fine and that's great. But what it does with that sort of hard binding is that it limits, I think, competition and choice, because it creates a barrier to entry for a lot of new entrants who would either have similar types of activities, like let's say Foursquare, wanted to be represented in the friend feed context. Well, FriendFeed would then have to have a deal with, I'm sorry, not FriendFeed, Foursquare. Foursquare would have to have a deal with FriendFeed to be represented and shown with a map, because otherwise FriendFeed doesn't know what that is. Well, multiply that times all the different places where news streams and activity streams make sense. So you're going to want to be using a stream as your primary metaphor for consuming a vast quantity of information from what your friends are doing, and you don't want to care where they're doing those things. So from that perspective, the idea is if we can come up with a standard structure for expressing who's doing what, where, and with whom, then you can choose whichever service serves your needs the best, and you can substitute those services at any time.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is
activities can use whatever tools make sense to them.
Right. So you're not. This isn't about federation. Then this is just about distribution.
It's about creating
federation too.
A competitive.
Well, I mean, the extent to which it's about federation, I think politically it's a non-starter. So I'm just trying to separate the two. Well, for the reasons that.
So the basic idea here is that, look, there's a lot of different RSS readers and feed readers, and people want to have the choice about which feed reader serves their interest the best. They might give up on Google Reader and go to something else that provides a better experience, or is smarter, or is the tech meme of the future, or whatever. Well, great. The only reason why that can happen is because there's all these different websites out there producing a feed of their content and data that doesn't require you to view their data in a way that they've chosen. It's basically structured data.
Right,
so
but that's at the level of the client, and certainly we've seen. I mean, I personally don't agree with you about that people are going to give up on Google Reader. I think they're giving up on feed readers. But let's say that
they would.
Let's say that they move from feed readers to stream readers, which is what I think is happening.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So the client, that's one thing. But essentially what this is, from my perspective, is a struggle economically about what originally was called the ping server, and which is now seeming to migrate to hub servers. We have a number of competing groups and also cooperating groups who are talking about services which can be aligned with each other through a federated series of servers. right?
Yep.
Okay, that to me is a very powerful change in the economics of the network, where it took somebody like Dave Weiner to be able to. I'm hearing some feedback here.
Yeah.
Where it took somebody like Dave Weiner to basically get enough momentum to be able to bring blogs up to parity with mainstream media, with the original Pink server. This real-time environment is incredibly volatile, and how you manage the politics and the market force energy of the major providers to be able to get from where we are to where we all want to go. That to me is the fundamental issue. So when I talk about MySpace, I'm just basically using that as code for this is a smaller player in this ecosystem, and it has much less impact. Just because you align a bunch of smaller players together, it doesn't add up to one Facebook, for example. So what I'm interested in is
Facebook on board.
Sorry, I talked over you. What did you say?
I was just saying that it's good that we have Facebook on board. I mean, Facebook is putting up a hub, and they're also supporting activity streams. So, in terms of sending a message to the marketplace, the signal to the marketplace, the hope is that they will see that these are open technologies that aren't really going to be a competitive advantage. The competitive advantage, I think, is actually going to be in being your social identity provider moving forward, and I think Facebook actually wants to compete in a more open place because I think not only do they have the data, but they have the desire to keep moving in that direction in a way that no one else is showing leadership.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to it, the future is that's where the battle is.
Isn't it ironic that Twitter is becoming the closed and Facebook is becoming the open?
I don't know if that's entirely accurate. I think that they're holding different crown jewels in different ways.
Craig, you've been holding certain crown jewels at various times in your career. Going back to Novell, what do you see? I mean, let me ask this a slightly different way, which is, who's going to screw this up, Craig?
Pretty tough at this point.
It's just inevitable, you think?
Yeah, and it's kind of under the radar. It's so complicated. The biggest way it gets screwed up is that we tend to dive into the beauty of the algorithm and talk about the technology as opposed to the end result, as witnessed by this broadcast. And then the other extreme is to say, well, but I want it to be so simple as to have my grandma use it, and it doesn't work like that. I think the biggest hurdle we have to go through is going back to the fundamental that these things get adopted like a curve, and we want to focus on the innovators and early adopters and get them to understand this and do it, and then the rest will follow. I don't have to jump to my grandma first.
But Steve, here's something that even grandma wants, right? I'm watching my wife how she uses Facebook, and it's much more like an average person uses it. But
your wife's no grandma.
No, but she's closer to a grandma than I am. And I'm watching other people who are, I live on a block with a lot of people who don't understand anything we have been talking about today. So,
I don't understand anything.
What is coming through their Facebook is baby photos and things that they want to keep, and they can't keep them. And that's where curation. When I ask for curation, I'm asking for it from a professional publisher's point of view, but there's also a need for curation from a grandma's point of view, which is I want to grab something out of a stream. My granddaughter got tagged in a stream, and I see the photo there, and I can't keep it. I can't grab it and put it on a page or put it on a stream that I control. They never talk about streams or pages, right? But they want to keep it in an album or put it on a web page to share with their friends. Look at my cute granddaughter, right? And we can't do that. And if we could do it, it's very complicated. I mean, I can do it. I can go to Facebook and take a screen capture and put it on in a WordPress and then curate it there. But that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of geeky work, right? Work that normal people are not going to know how to do or have the tools to do. So that's where I'm hoping is can we bundle these things together? We can't. I can't bundle 3 of these comments or 3 of these tweets that are coming across my screen together into a single URL. And can we add some value on top of those bundles? You know,
I could do that easy with Kinetics just right now.
Okay, I got to get a demo off air because that sounds interesting.
Phil?
We can arrange that, Robert. We'll give you a demo.
Okay.
Yeah, he could do that right now. Just
I'm listening to what you're saying, Robert, and I think it's interesting because I believe that the first step towards that is having a protocol, a format like activity streams, where, you know, rather than having a lot of different formats, you can say, okay, grab this thing and it's in a nice package. I can take that package, I can put it somewhere else, I can stick it on another stream, right? And the ability to manipulate these things is ultimately dependent on having this nice format. So I think what you're seeing is maybe the start of that ability. We're not there yet, but it's coming.
That's why I'm so interested in what you guys are doing. So.
Yeah, it's the underpinnings to build those kinds of tools. That's exactly it. Did you see? I put a link to ClickSet in the friend feed room. Have a look at that because they're already building a sort of friend feed like aggregator around activity streams, and they're translating other stream formats into activity streams there. So that's definitely worth a look. ClickSet with a Q.
Nice.
All right, I think I'm going to wrap this one up. This is Steve Gillmor. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and that includes Craig Burton. Thank you, Craig. Phil Windley and Chris Messina from IIW at the Computer History Museum, where they are busy making history. Robert Scoble. Kevin Marks.
Oh, I wanted to say, if you want a Ribbit mobile invite, use gang09 as the invite code for anyone watching.
And for those of you who are watching on the YouTube version of the show in a couple of days, I want to thank Rackspace for sponsoring the show. Nice. I want to thank Rob Legess for being one of the smartest people in the business.
Whose butt was that?
What?
Whose butt was that?
It's getting very ugly. This is when we go back to the bootleg audio version only. And I want to thank NewTek for allowing this TriCast to take place. This is Steve Gillmor. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. See you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.